The crested pigeon, or top-knot pigeon, is a relatively common Australian bird species. It is uniquely identifiable by the short, black feathered spike on their heads that is only shared with the smaller spinifex pigeon. Other characteristic features include their contrasting plumage, with dull greys and browns just below the neck, blending with lighter pink patches below the wings, which themselves have striking green and purple highlights that are layered underneath thin black stripes. Their eyes are orange with a cartoonish black ring surrounding the pupil, which stands out as another unique feature from other pigeon species. Identifying whether an individual pigeon is male or female is difficult due to them sharing the same plumage. The pigeon originally only inhabited much drier inland areas of Australia, preferring more open grasslands with water resources readily available to them, and avoided dense or tropical forests. With European settlement, the crested pigeon migrated coastward as they adjusted to new urban environments. The crested pigeon has now made its home among Australia's major urban landscapes as they have developed over the last 100 years, and is a feature of cities like Adelaide and Melbourne. The main reason for this migration is the European colonisation of Australia, which was largely beneficial for the crested pigeons. The novel urban habitat providing an ideal space where resources such as food and water are in abundance, while reducing their encounters with natural predators. These predators would normally be snakes and larger birds of prey, which both tend to avoid larger cities, consequently being replaced by foxes and feral cats that pose a smaller and more inconsistent threat to the much more mobile pigeons. In response to threats, the pigeons produce a specific whistling noise when frantically flapping their wings and immediately take flight, also notifying any other nearby crested pigeons of the possible danger. This is an innate response. Its sound is uniquely identifiable to crested pigeons. The pigeon's diet has even adapted to the new species of plants that have resulted from colonisation. Introduced crops and weeds being incorporated into their usual meal choices of native seeds, leaves, herbs, and insects. Breeding typically occurs in the warmer months from September to March, as food is more readily abundant and the weather is more suited to raising newborn chicks. The male pigeons court females by performing a complex mating dance involving bobbing, hooting, and fanning of their wings. The female can then choose whether to accept or reject the proposing male. The nests they build are constructed of local sticks and twigs, generally situated in thick brush or high up in tree scrub, so as to keep their eggs or chicks relatively hidden. Once eggs are laid, they can take up to 3 or 4 weeks to hatch, after which both parents care for the chicks until they are ready to leave the nest. Females are able to have more than one brood per year, partially explaining the species' relatively sudden population spikes in city habitats. To monitor this, we set out to observe and document sightings of the crested pigeon. The aim of the project was to observe the crested pigeon in its natural environment, noting where it is and what behaviour it's displaying. After identifying the bird as our indicated species via its various unique features, an attempt to take a photo of the animal is made in order to help recall the sighting later. We then note down the specific activity it is performing, whether it is feeding, idle, or searching for food, water, or mates. The date, time, and location are recorded and used to help form trends and compare sightings to older data about their behaviour during the time of day and the time of year. From our 11 personal sightings, we observed that for the most part, the pigeons dedicate their time to eating or searching for food, likely due to this being more critical during the colder months, to ensure flock survival into spring. None of our sightings involved any of the described mating dances or featured nests, again probably due to the seasonal timing during which this experiment was conducted. The pigeons tend to prefer to mate and rear young during warmer periods. The State of Climate 2018 report from the Australian Bureau of Meteorology states that Australia's climate has warmed just over 1 degree Celsius since 1910, leading to an increase in the frequency of extreme heat events. The Biodiversity and Climate Change Virtual Laboratory used a model to predict in a business-as-usual model where rising temperatures and climate change processes remain unchanged, the future habitats for the crested pigeon in 2020. It found that crested pigeon population density will move to greater latitudes and towards the coast, where the temperature was previously cooler. It also indicated that the habitats in orange, typically of lower latitudes, will experience population contraction. Based on this, it was predicted that as the climate warms, the birds will start breeding earlier. They may also start appearing more frequently at higher latitudes as warmer temperatures enable them to live in environments that were previously too cold. By comparing Climate Watch data collected since 2009, the mean latitude of crested pigeon sightings was calculated for each year. Graphing this data found that there was no observable trend in latitude changes of Climate Watch sightings since 2009, which is contrary to the hypothesis. However, the day of the first breeding activity following the winter month of June was also compared across the years. Analysis of these observations was found that there is a negative linear trend, indicating that the time of breeding is becoming closer to winter each year. There may have been some possible errors in determining both trends in results and conclusions, as data gathered was predominantly from civilian scientists using Climate Watch, with each sighting's detail or accuracy varying depending on an objective opinion as to the bird's activity. A majority of sightings we listed were made around the Clayton area. Other popular sighting locations include the inner city area and surrounding suburbs. As most of our first-hand sightings were made in the Melbourne area, results and conclusions made for crested pigeons as a whole are also more reliant on extrapolation or generalization using data from journal articles or papers, assuming members of the species behave similarly in other Australian habitats. Crested pigeon species were sighted in an abundance throughout the suburban and city areas of Melbourne, reflecting their trends in migration from inland Australia to more coastal and urbanised locations over the past decades. Their appearance and behavioural trends were consistent with those described in scientific literature and those listed by other Climate Watch civilian scientists. Our data could not be relied upon to indicate the effect of climate change on latitude change of the crested pigeon. However, our data found that with increasing temperatures, the crested pigeon begins breeding earlier in the warm season.